So this morning I'm going to prune off some of the leaves off my zucchini. I was doing a bit of research yesterday, and they said to take out any crisscrossing leaves, so any leaves that are touching the plant beside it, and some of these bottom leaves, and just leave most of the nice healthy leaves on top. You can see we've got some lovely zucchini growing here. Needs to be picked. Phil's been making some pickles, and actually some of them are getting rather large for the pickles. But we also like to create oh, look at this. Oh, there's more of the squash bugs in here. I don't know. I'm gonna have to put something on these flowers. So I've pruned some leaves off the first 3 plants. And that's opened it up really well. I might take this one off here. There we go. Yeah. That's really opened up this area for airflow. And they said you can take quite a bit off, and if you've got all these really healthy top leaves, then you don't need a lot of these bottom ones. And
This big one here, should I take it off? It's kind of ugly looking.
Yeah, you can take that off. There's a lot of sun leaves there. So it looks pretty drastic what we've taken off. But it's supposed to really help with the health of the plant and reinvigorate it to keep production going all summer long. So we're here with Tim Hanlon at his property near Ingersoll area. And this was your great-grandfather's farm?
Yeah, so we actually bought the farm here in 1883. The property itself, first deeded record of it at the township office is 1835, and it was originally owned by the sheriff of the county. And then our family bought it along with 4 other farms in the area adjacent, which were meant to be divided up through the generations and the sons. So myself and my sister Paula were the 5th generation, I guess, on this farm.
That's so cool. So you've taken over just last year?
Yeah,
Caretaker?
with our parents have passed away, so we took over. We technically have owned it for just over a year now, and it's huge. So trying to figure out what to do with what, and a lot of it's based on things that we like, things that we remember, part of the family history, and maybe some of our own plans for how to take it forward too.
Right. And I like your stories about how your grandfather or great-grandfather had borders here.
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many years of agricultural history here. I was telling you just earlier that, I was asking an older cousin how they managed 200 acres before power tractors, mechanical, electrical engines, chainsaws, all that sort of thing. And he told me that in 1900 they were milking between 40 and 50 head of cattle here, which was all by hand, managing the 200 acres, which was enough to provide all the food that the animals would need and then sell a little bit of extra produce. But they had 8 people working here. And some of the guys were working here basically for room and board, and as my older cousin said, and their tobacco. And I still have some of my great-grandfather's records from those summers of who came to work and how much they were paid for the season, and little deductions for things that they bought from him, like the company store. So a nickel for a hammer, or this much for shoes or a coat. And it's really neat to look back at those records from, really 100 years ago.
You were talking about renovating these gardens back to, was it your grandfather's time?
The stories that I've heard more of course, are more recent. So we're talking 40s, 50s, and 60s. Because, who's left alive that remembers the turn of the 1900s? But my great-grandfather, Jim Sr., was also called the Boss, everybody called him the Boss, was a fantastic gardener. And the property around the house was all laid out with both practical gardens in order to have enough food for the winter and for all the people that would work here, and numerous cousins who stayed here, grew up here. The house was always full, as well as a little bit of market gardening, and then a lot of flower gardening as well. And one of the best stories, and one of my favorite, and something that I'm trying to live to, is some of my older cousins said that Jim Sr. never let a woman leave the property without fresh cut flowers. And, I'm not that great a gardener, but I think that's something really to strive for. So with what's left here and what we've been bringing back and encouraging along, anytime I can do that, I think that's a great honor to my grandfather in the spirit of that. In the house, I have an old map of how the gardens were laid out at one point, hand-drawn with what he would have put where. So some of the ambition is to continue to follow those footprints. Some of it might not be possible because it was a pretty large scale, but the gardens closer to the house and so on, I'd really like to see them brought back over the next few years.
We're at the front of the house now, Tim.
Yeah, so I figured we'd just start here. Again, work in progress everywhere. But with this type of house, there's 3 entrances, 3 porches. This is the front porch, which would have been the formal greeting people here.
Right.
And my grandfather had a garden down front in this footprint here. I haven't done much with it this year. I like the ferns. They take care of themselves and they look great. They're also good if you do any flower arranging. It's fantastic to walk out and just grab a couple, trim them up, and give a little greenery for what you've arranged. And I put a hibiscus in here. Love the hibiscus look and the color splash in the front. The challenge will be how I winter that. So we'll see how I do with that one to get it out and put it somewhere safe. And then if we look a little further on, I am reclaiming the hydrangeas, which are starting this year. In my memory, the whole front of the house was a giant hydrangea bush. So to me as a kid, it was just snowballs everywhere in the summertime.
Nice.
That area had been overgrown with forsythia, which did look really impressive this spring with that much yellow, but it was way too overgrown, so I tore it out. And if we move over, I'll show a little bit, again, trying to get the old footprint back. So most important are lilacs, which I also remember from back in this area as a kid. There were a lot of lilacs here, and they were tremendously scented in the spring. So I put in a purple lilac, and I want to get a white lilac as well for that contrast. And a rose in the center, because that just sort of reminded me of my grandmother, and my younger sister mentioned that too, so I thought, great way to put that in. And then around the front of the bed, I'm very big on anything that's pollinator friendly. So we've put in a bunch of different pollinator plants. We'll see how they go. The other funny thing about this bed is I always thought it was really shady, which it is now, but working in it, I've got morning until about 4 p.m. sun. So we used to treat it a bit like a shady dump, and it's actually a really good area to grow.
Yeah, that's a lot of good sun.
And then if we carry on a little further, my other sort of pride project is an old gooseberry bush, which was fascinated with as a kid. It's managed to survive, and this year's been very good to it. So I've been coaxing along a little bit, and this year it's doubled itself in size, and I trimmed all the suckers out of the trees behind it, and it looks like it's going to be a tremendous year for gooseberries. So this whole area in my grandfather's day was garden, all tilled, and then it would be productive, again, food source for the farm, and maybe a little market gardening, and certainly tons and tons of cousins would have left with everything that they were producing. So I've not retailed that yet, and it gradually shrank in my parents' days, and now it's just lawn. But we put in sunflowers because that's just fun to look at, 2 walls of sunflowers, and it's a good test. And a little further back, I've done a very basic pollinator garden with a few pre-done things and then a pollinator mix. I love anything to do with pollinators. I think it's fantastic to help the bees and butterflies. And over here in the grove, it's another thing I've been working on for a while. The grapevine would have been my grandfather's. It's just a table grape, and I coaxed it back from a tiny little patch a few years ago to the whole run here, and it actually will climb up into the tree. We'll get some really good bunches off of it, and it's a true heritage table grape, so it tastes like grapes did when we were kids. They taste really purple and really fresh. So I've coaxed it along, and it's been a lot of fun, again, just to have something growing that I'm working on, and I know that my grandfather worked on as well. Interspersed throughout it, we actually have a great deal of wild garlic, which you would think I'd know all about this stuff, but I didn't realize, just learned this year, that you have to take the scapes off to encourage the bulbs to grow larger. The scapes are very flavorful, so I'll be doing that this week, is taking a bunch of the scapes off to see if I can't encourage a little bit more mass in the garlic bulbs for the fall. I've taken them before, and even though they're really small, they're incredibly flavorful, and I've done them up in an oil, and you get a really amazing subtle garlic oil off them. So I'm looking forward to seeing if I can get a little more growth out of them this year. So the property is covered with black raspberries that have gone wild, again, something my grandfather cultivated. These guys are tiny, but very flavorful. You can see a little bit there. And they're right on the cusp. They will start ripening almost by the hour. So you can come out here in the morning, pick once, come back. By 4 o'clock, there's a whole new basket of berries in the area. These are the earliest ones. They're a little bit more sun exposed and come up as a much smaller, but we're going to go and show you the ones at the back, which are much bigger. So back here, we're in what was the old cow paddock, which was just manure and mud and cows for years and years and years, 100 years of soil remediation here. And the black raspberries have taken over, and you can see how they grow up almost 10 feet at the back, and how full the heads are with berries that are going to be really big. And so they're incredibly productive based on the soil that's just accidentally underneath them. And that's the kind of thing where once they start to pop, you'd be able to come out and just basically hold your basket underneath and have fresh berries falling right into it without much effort. So it's pretty chaotic gardening here, and some of this is found plants, some of it is random stuff that's, you know, naturalized and coming up on its own. But I love the serendipity of it. And so the black raspberries from here wind up in Junction 56 in Stratford's Black Raspberry Gin. So it's a few years ago I ran into them at a local festival and tried some of their product and said, wow, this would taste really, really good with black raspberries from our farm. And the young lady, Leah, who was running the booth that day, said, what? So we talked about it, and the first summer they came out, picked a bunch, tried it in their gin, turned into a fantastic product. And so for the last 3 summers, they've been welcome out here to take as much as they can because it's really free for the taking and randomly growing. And I'd love to see it go to something rather than go to waste. And it's a fantastic product. It's available now and in the LCBOs, but it was a sellout in the first few years. And it was just a neat little collaboration, neat little experiment, and really kind of fun. So per my grandfather's tradition of always having cut flowers for a lady to leave the farm with, we just did a quick wander. I grabbed a nice little rose, a little bit of the spirea. I've got lots of greenery here, so we whip up a quick little bouquet in order to send Heather home from her little visit to the old Hanlon farm.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you for having us.
All right, so I'm making pickled zucchinis, and I've got all these different things from the garden. I've got some nice fresh thyme. I've got some flat leaf parsley. It's kind of bolted and starting to go a little bit to flower, so good time to sort of pick it and use it. And got a little bit of borage flowers, and some curly parsley, and some dill. And the cilantro was looking pretty good in the spring, but now it's I've just picked a few leaves. It's a bold flavor, so not too worried about not having enough of that. But and then I've got giant musselburgh leeks that I'm taking the flowers off of, and they're just coming on to flowering, and some are full on flowers. Nice to collect some seeds, but it's nice to take these off to send the energy to the leek itself. So I'm doing using some of that in there. Going to split that up. I'm going to take some of these smaller zucchinis and cut them in half, and probably make some quarters or 8 pieces or whatever of some of these bigger zucchinis, even though they're pretty small. But I want them to fit nice in some liter jars. So I've got my vinegar and salt brine all set, ready. I'm just going to put them inside these jars. I'm boiling the jars and lids, and and I have a little bit. I was thinking I just got a little bit of powdered curry that I was going to put in there. I have some nice sort of paste curry, but that stuff is pretty darn good. Even turmeric is really nice, just to kind of color it. These are nice and bold and yellow anyway, and then a little bit of pickling spice, and so I'll get started. Okay, so I'm just a little bit of the leek onion or the leek flour, and I'm just going to cut this, and it's really kind of cool looking on the inside, and I just like to put it in there for a little bit of a look, and let the flavors kind of come through. I just put it in like that. I could quarter that, but I kind of like it like this. I'm going to take the ends off of the zucchinis, even just sort of clean up this other end. Not necessary to take too much. And I'm just going to cut these guys in half. And maybe we'll fast forward through this part, but I'll just get this cut and prepared. So these next ones are a little bit bigger, and I was thinking I'm going to cut them into smaller ones. So I'm going to take the tops off, just like in the flower end, a little bit, cut them in half, then take those halves, and then just even, if I could even make 6. So do 3 little strips like that. That's going to fit inside the jar pretty good. It's a little bit long. You could take a little bit off, but I think you can kind of compress them down. And these are a good size. So we'll go ahead and get that done. So there we go. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to look and see if you can see all those, and I'll actually bring the camera over and just show you what I've done. Just basically taken all the zucchinis and stripped them up, taken all the tops and everything. This one actually was kind of funny. It was kind of stopped growing and became hollow, so I'm not going to use it. And then I've got all the parsleys and borage and curly parsley, some dill in here. This is the thyme, looks beautiful. Oh, and it smells so good, and it's nice. I just put it in nice and fresh. I've rinsed this off. Give this stuff a bit of a rinse, and we'll carry on with this. Okay, so now I'm just going to jar these up, and I've got my hot jar right here, and I'm just going to put these guys in, stick a bunch of different sizes and different things, and see what I can actually fit in here. Some of these are a little long. I might have to trim them. Shame to have to trim that, but I guess I could just put them back in the bottom, couldn't I? But sometimes you have to sort of angle it and get as much in here as possible, and then put a little bit of your other herbs. I put a tablespoon of pickling spice in here, maybe a little more. I'm gonna throw a little curry powder in this one. See if that gives a nice flavor. Throw some curly parsley and some flat parsley in there, some thyme. And I picked these borage flowers. I'm going to put some borage flower in there for color and fun. Some of the other flour. And a little bit of dill. That in there, and then just keep on jamming as many of the zucchini in here as I possibly can. I'm just going to put those little pieces right back in there. And that's a fairly full jar with all the spices and everything, and then I'm just gonna there's one jar done. Looks really nice. Just carry on, see how many more jars I can do. Jar number 2. Just give it a little bit of a spin around there to get that curry paste or curry powder all incorporated in. Well, this jar isn't quite full, so I'm gonna go get some onions and stick them in there. There, okay, so I just went out and grabbed a few more zucchini. They're littler, but for the sake of filling that jar, that'll be great. Cut these up. There we go, that's nice and full, and I'll just add my vinegar, water, salt mixture, my brine, and done. There's 3 jars. Nice. All set for Thanksgiving or Christmas, or maybe in a couple of weeks.